Hello and welcome to GuyLogic. My name is Temko and this is Talent Not Included, a platformer in the purest form, a pretty difficult platformer at that, developed by Firma Studios. This is their third game and let's see what they made of it, shall we? Before we dive into the actual gameplay of this very cool platformer, let's dive into some option menu and some issues I have with the PC build. First things first, you'll notice that the menu has no mouse options. It does not have any mouse control. It doesn't have any mouse control in the entire game, which for the controlling part of the game is acceptable because it is a very specific control scheme, but from an interface standpoint, it is not acceptable at all to have no mouse control at all. The game has a couple of ways to display dialogue as well as a couple of languages, which is basically French, Russian, or English. At least I think this is Russian. Then you have video, which is low, medium, or high, which is pretty limited at that. Now, it is a 2D game, so you don't expect that many options, but you at least expect AA or shadows or something like that from the way this game was rendered. Audio has two sliders for music and SFX. There are no narrator sounds at all, so that's fine. There's also no dialogue option in the game from a narrative standpoint, so that's also fine. These two will do just fine. Input-wise, you have a input scheme for keyboard as well as one for controller, but these are non-rebindable, and that is my second issue with the game's title on PC, that these controls are not rebindable, and they have no mouse control at all. Both of these are pretty much black marks against the game. I'd like to have a little bit more video quality options, like I said, shadows, AA, stuff like that, but other than that, pretty much as you'd expect it to be. Nothing really weird or strange I'm here outside of the things I mentioned. What I am kind of missing here is a colorblind mode. This game would have greatly benefited from that mode in just having the ability to do that. The game is very colorful, and I don't think a colorblind mode would be that much more difficult to implement for something like this. Again, if they had rebindable keys, it would also be much more available for people with physical handicaps and stuff like that. Because the game's control scheme is limited to like 7 buttons, which is 4 movement buttons, a jump button, and 2 action buttons, this is a very good game for people that can only use one hand or have to use a special mouse or keyboard for that, but without being able to rebind those keys, that makes it a lot harder. So again, a bit of a downside from the PC build of the game. But that doesn't tell us much about the game itself. Now, the game has local co-op, not online co-op. So if you want to play this game on a big screen, maybe you have a projector or a PC hooked up in your TV in your living room, then this is a pretty good game to play with 2 players and enjoy it that way. On a PC, obviously, you expect online multiplayer, and any game that doesn't have it is always a little bit lagging behind games that do have it, from simply the fact that most people on a PC do so in an office setting or in a one-person setup with a big chair on a desk, and generally don't have the setup to play with multiple people behind one PC, at least not comfortably. So if you have this on a TV setup with controllers, then local co-op is pretty cool. But right now, with just a PC variant, I don't think so. And then we have single player, which has 4 acts, and each act has a very specific character as its main protagonist. You have the warrior, the rogue, and then the mage, and they all perform basically the same actions but with a little bit of variant. The warrior has a spinning slash moving forward, and the rogue has a sort of roll dodge move that can go over spikes. A bit of a different variety. Also, the puzzles, or should I say the platforming elements of both acts are pretty different. And if I check Act 1, you'll see there's quite a few acts here, and each level has their own bosses. So the game is not shy on content at all. So you can actually have quite a bit of content here, which is a really good thing because the game doesn't have a lot of replay value outside of score attacks, which are somewhat implemented in the game. There's no way outside of like the end score screen of the game to get access to the online leaderboards, which is a bit of a shame. But there are online leaderboards because you are competing against other players and your high score is recorded based on how well you did the level. The way the score is calculated is a combination of your speed, the amount of points collected, and as well as how much damage you've taken, which deducts bonus time of your points. So there's that. So faster, collect coins or collect candy in this game, and that's really it. So let's go ahead and dive into the game. I'll show you a bit of Act 1 and then switch to Act 2, and I'll talk a little bit of the gameplay and the good and bad parts about that. So jumping into gameplay, this is one of the stages in Act 1. You can see that this is literally a theater. My character gets on stage and he has to perform a little bit of tricks based on the level. Every level has a number of screens. Each screen starts with you doing something and ends up with this glowing orb you have to pick up. From an aesthetic, this game is very clean. All the platforms are clearly marked. There's never any confusion regarding where you can or can't stand. Everything is quite well put together to facilitate where you should go, where you shouldn't go, and all the levels are laid out in a very logical fashion from both a aesthetic standpoint in terms of level design as well as in raw level and screen design. This game has done a pretty damn good job. There is never any confusion as to where you need to go. There's never any confusion what your possible actions are, and all the mechanics, straightforward as they are explained quite well in both tooltips in game as well as just through actual gameplay cohesion, which is something that's pretty good. Now, from a pure visual perspective, the game actually looks pretty damn nice. The colorful art style still conveys a pretty deep feeling, and the sort of bracketed kind of background with trees and stuff does really showcase a theater-esque environment where you expect things to look a little bit faker than the foreground with the actor looking more realistic and more detailed. This little contrast is pretty damn cool. I do really enjoy that. It really fits with the theme quite well. One thing I don't really enjoy that much is the way the game forces you into using 2 buttons to do every action, sometimes costing you precious nuance and detail in regards to what is going to happen. It's also clear that this indie title has had a very limited art budget in terms of creation of assets. A lot of assets are reused in a variety of ways, and while 9 out of 10 times this does not lead to any confusion, in certain situations, especially the first time you introduce a certain mechanic or a new variant on a certain hazard or mechanic or puzzle, there is definitely some confusion in regards to what these things might do. A good example is the rotating blades. In some scenarios, they move slowly. In other scenarios, they move very fast. In other scenarios, they move slowly along a track. In other scenarios, they move fast along a track. 9 out of 10 times, you can figure out which one it is when you pay attention to the actual blades. But when you first encounter these variants of blades, it is a lot harder to figure out what they do, resulting in needless deaths and repeats of the same level, which is something that also bothers me about this game a bit. While each stage is saved between stages and you can pass between each stage as you will, within a stage, every screen does not save. So if you die in the very last screen, you have to start over from scratch. And while that is understandable from their desired mechanically difficult experience they want to go for, a hard, unforgiving platformer, it is still very frustrating to go through the same 5 or 6 screens and then die on the same puzzle 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times because you're having difficulty with one specific screen and then have to redo all of those screens time and again. Not that fun at all. But on the flip side, it does provide a certain level of challenge and satisfaction that when you finally do beat that screen, when you finally do pass that stage, you feel you've actually accomplished something. So from that perspective, the game has done a pretty good job. From a story side, the game is pretty bare bones. It's about 3 heroes that have started a stage troupe, a theater troupe, and because they don't actually have any talent to go on stage, they hire someone to get them some no good adventurers to go ahead and do their challenge. And the dialogue options that are in the game, just as a little bit of extra fluff to the story, are pretty well thought out. The comedy is pretty good, the writing is decently good, and the experience of doing the various things really does breed a certain B-grade cliche monster comedy. You know, the villains have cliche villain aspects to them, which really does bring some life to the entire thing. It's a stage troupe, but it's a new one. They're making mistakes, they're messing up left and right. There's a lot of things that go wrong on stage. When enemies have to hang from the ceiling because they're bosses or because they are supposed to fly. All of these things, you see ropes from the top. Everything is quite nice from a cohesive standpoint in terms of both narrative and gameplay experience for it. But there are some issues with this title particularly. And I feel this is particularly true in regards to most games that have a very limited control scheme. The game has to do everything with 2 buttons. And in many cases, in such situations, I've noticed the game just doesn't have the fine-tuned control you'd expect from a game where you have contextual keys and specific buttons for specific actions. I have no choice. If I get to a wall, I'll stick to it. I don't have a choice between sliding down or moving up or jumping and jumping back on. There's no way for me to decide any of these things. And that is sort of annoying, especially on a PC where I have the control scheme and where I have the ability to do exactly that. Sadly, the game doesn't provide for that, which is a bit of a shame. Now, from a platforming perspective, just from the challenge aspect of the game, it does a pretty good job of being challenging, interesting, as well as quite cohesive in allowing you to stage practices and go forward in speedrun moments. The game isn't procedurally generated or anything of the sort. All the stages are handcrafted to provide a very specific experience and guide you to a very specific level, and that is pretty good. Each stage or each level is split up in several stages, about 15 of each, and each one has bosses, and each gun gets progressively harder based on where you're at. Now, there's no way to skip ahead on stages, even though you do unlock the next act halfway through your previous act. So I've unlocked Act 2 after completing the first 8 stages of Act 1, which is a good thing in of itself. It does give some variety, but between that, you're kind of stuck playing that one hero or that one champion until you get to unlock the next one, which does bring some monotone into the entire thing. The variety of switching between 3 different characters just isn't there that much, which is a bit of a shame. So overall, Talent Not Included provides a pretty challenging platform experience, but with quite limited PC control support. It provides a cohesive, narrative, and visual perspective, fine-tuned for platforming and the speedrunning experience they want to create, but it does leave something to be desired in both the art department as well as the overall gameplay department in terms of control complexity and control scheme. A nice little indie title that gives you a couple of hours of enjoyment, and if you have the kind of setup to allow for multiplayer couch co-op, it is a great game to play with a friend or spouse on a Saturday night, just having fun and completing challenging puzzles. So if you want to check out this game, it comes out on August 30th. You can check it out on Steam if you are so inclined. So thank you for watching. If you like this video, press the like button below. If you didn't like this video, well, there's a dislike button for exactly that purpose. And leave a comment. Tell us what you liked. Tell us what you didn't like. We want to hear back from all of you. And if you want to see more content like this on the channel, just press that subscribe button below and we will deliver. And until then, I wish you a good day, and until next time, right here on GuyLogic.